Driving along a highway one evening, two college boys spotted a very pretty girl in a bright lavender dress standing by the side of the road. When they stopped to offer her a lift, she accepted, telling them that she was going to a dance a couple of miles away. They, too, were going to a dance, they said. Why didn't she join them? She agreed, and they talked and laughed merrily on the way. At the dance hall, she at once became the center of attention, for in addition to her beauty, she was an excellent dancer and full of bright conversation and sparkling wit. When asked her name, she laughed and replied, "Just call me Lavender." And this air of mystery seemed to add to her charms. It was very late when the boys drove her home. The night air had grown cool, and one of her escorts gave her his topcoat to wear. She directed them to her house, a dilapidated shack way back on a rutted dirt road, and the boys bade her good night. It wasn't until they had arrived at their school that they realized the topcoat had not been returned. They decided that the next afternoon they would go back for it. At the shack the next day, a very old woman answered their knock. She knew no Lavender, she said, and the boys described their companion from the previous evening. Recognition came to the woman's withered face. They were describing Lily, she told them, and Lily had been dead for many years. She was buried in an old abandoned cemetery down the road. The two flustered boys drove away in stunned silence. It was a hoax, they thought. For what other explanation could there be? A few miles down the dirt road, they noticed the gravestones of the old cemetery. Impulsively, they stopped to look around. There, off to the side, was a small stone with the name Lily. Neatly folded upon the rounded grave was the missing coat. On a train going through Canada one night, some of us were sitting up pretty late telling yarns. One of the chaps in the party told this story. A friend of his who lived in Ontario became fascinated with an old painting he saw in a dingy little store. The picture was of a castle on a hilltop. The scene was dark and gloomy, and every window in the castle was dark, except for a small one high in a stone tower. The man wondered why anyone would paint a castle with a light in just one window. Was there a story behind it? He bought the painting and hung it up in his home, but all he could learn was that it depicted a castle in Scotland. There was neither signature or date. One day, as he was cleaning the painting, he found a few Latin words in a corner. He asked a friend to translate the words for him, and learned that they meant, "Every century, it will be dark." But this inscription made little sense to either of them, and so it was soon forgotten. The painting hung in the man's home for many years, and his children took pleasure in speculating about why the window was lighted, and who had lived up there in the tower. It was quite a source of conversation for many years, but it was to become even more so. One evening, The owner of the painting was telling some guests about how he had acquired it, and all the questions surrounding its background and meaning. The guests wanted to see this unusual and mysterious piece of art, so they all trooped into the hall where it hung. Imagine their astonishment and the consternation of their host to see that on the painting, the window in the tower was dark. They examined the painting and were further astonished to see that the black paint on the once light yellow window was as old and cracked as the paint on the rest of the picture. There were no signs that it had ever been different, let alone bright yellow. After the guests had gone, the embarrassed host unsuccessfully tried to find a solution to the puzzle. The next morning, he returned to the painting and felt his skin crawl, for again the window in the tower was lighted. Then he thought of the Latin inscription, "Every century it will be dark." He made a note of the date and began a serious search into Scottish history. Eventually, these facts were uncovered. The castle had been home to an evil character who had 2 sons. He hated the elder son and kept him locked in the tower, while his younger son had all the wealth and pleasures he could give him. Exactly 500 years before the night when the painted window was dark, the imprisoned elder son had died in the little room high in the tower. Driving toward Montgomery, Alabama, late one night, 2 businessmen planned to spend the night in a small town on the way. They were making good time through some low country where the road was a few feet above the surrounding land, when they spotted a figure far ahead. As they drew nearer, they discovered it was a little old lady, walking briskly along the side of the road. In the beam of the headlight, they saw that she wore a pale lavender dress, freshly pressed and sparkling clean. Her hair was neatly done, and as they slowed down to speak to her, she turned a smiling face to them. She seemed completely untroubled about walking down a lonely highway in the middle of the night, in an area where snakes and other creatures would make an average woman hesitate to step from a car. When the men stopped and asked her what she was doing on the road at that time of night, she laughingly explained that she had started out to visit her daughter and grandchildren in Montgomery. She had hoped, she said, to get a ride for at least part of the way, but no one had offered her a lift, so she just kept on walking. The 2 men said that they would give her a lift as far as the next town, a 2-hour drive, and she was delighted to accept. She sat in the back seat, and as they drove through the night, they talked about her daughter and 3 grandchildren, their names, where they lived, the children's school, usual small talk among strangers. When the subject was exhausted, the men eventually became engrossed in business conversation and forgot about the passenger behind them. When they reached their destination, they stopped to let the elderly lady out. She was gone. Panic-stricken to think that she might have fallen out along the way, they headed back in search of her, but they found no signs of their passenger. Even though they retraced their route to where they had picked her up, and saw her tiny footprints in the shoulder of the road, where she had first spoken to them. Dismayed and mystified, they drove on to Montgomery to tell her daughter about the accident. After listening to their story in bewilderment, the younger woman pointed to 3 photos on the mantel. Could they identify their passenger? They did, and she agreed that it was her mother. Without a doubt, they had talked to her. Then they went on to describe her dress, and the woman burst into tears, saying that was the very dress her mother wore the last time she had seen her. "When was that?" they asked her, and she replied between sobs, "When she was buried 3 years ago today." There is a house in Hampton, New Hampshire, that cannot cast off the spell that clings to it. Many persons over the years have insisted that they have seen and heard things in this house that cannot be explained. It all began when General Jonathan Moulton tried to outsmart the devil. General Moulton fought bravely in the French and Indian War, and after his military career, he returned to the house in Hampton where he was born. There he became wealthy and important, but that was not enough for him. One evening, as he was going over his accounts, he sighed and declared that he would sell his soul to the devil himself if he could become the wealthiest man in the state. At once, a great fountain of sparks burst down the chimney, and there before him stood the devil himself. Then and there a bargain was made. In return for the general's soul after death, the devil agreed to fill his tall boots with golden guineas every month. The general was very pleased with the arrangement and eagerly looked forward to the payments. Sure enough, on the 1st of the month, the boots were filled with gold, and every month from then on the guineas arrived. Yet even these riches did not satisfy the greedy man. One night, before the money was due, he hung his boots in the usual place in the chimney, but cut the bottoms out of them. When the devil went to fill them, the coins poured down and into the room, covering the floor knee-high. The general was delighted, but soon the devil realized what was going on. He stopped filling the bottomless boots and, enraged, took back all the gold he had given. He did not release the general from his bargain, and he turned up to claim his soul the day he died. Ever since then, the house was said to be haunted. Noises were heard in empty rooms, and in one room no lamp could be kept going no matter how well it was tended. The lights always went out as though snuffed by an unseen hand. Many families have lived there since General Moulton's time, but none have stayed long. For years the house stood idle, and then a cobbler rented it, scoffing at the tales he had heard. But he too left a short time afterward, for the boots he hung from the rafters in the old house refused to stay there, jumping from the pegs as if they had been pushed by some unseen hand.